Welcome back to Growth Without Barriers. I'm Andrew Sherman from Jones Day. I'm here with Karen Kerrigan from the SBE Council. I want to thank AT&T, our corporate sponsor of these webcasts. Well, Karen, we've got about a month before the elections, and there's a lot of issues being debated between the candidates. We've got the first debate coming up shortly. The impact of this election on small business is significant, and one of the issues that keeps coming up over and over again for a lot of very good reasons is this issue of regulation. What is the right amount of regulation to protect societal interest on the one hand, but not overburden particularly small companies, but really companies of all sizes, with regulation that's going to be viewed as anti-business or too restrictive of business. And I know that you've been doing tons of work in this area on what is the impact of all these regulations that have been issued and enforced more proactively by this administration.
Right, I think the big concern that business owners have right now is the number of regulations that are currently in the pipeline. You already had the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare, that passed. You had the Dodd-Frank bill that passed. And then you had a range of other initiatives that are going on at the EPA, the Department of Labor, and a variety of the other agencies where you have a lot of activity in terms of regulations. In fact, regulatory costs right now are $1.75 trillion, and they disproportionately impact small businesses.
Probably per day.
Well, look, at the end of 2011, there were over 4,000 regulations in the pipeline. 212 of those economically significant, meaning they have an economic impact of $100 million or more. 822 of those directly impact small business, and we know thousands more indirectly impact small businesses. So, what we're trying to do is, and what we've done, is we have a series of issues that we've gone through on where the candidates stand, when it comes to these major issues that are impacting small business. Because the impact of regulation is real. It is driving uncertainty, and it is driving up costs. And so we've looked at, the Romney-Ryan platform in terms of some of their proposals, and also have visited the Obama site to see what they plan to do on regulation.
And what are the plans?
Well, they better be doing something, right?
And again, I just want to drive this point home. I mean, it's one thing when Congress or an agency writes regulations, but what we've also seen in the last 4 years, and this is a very, very important point, is a significant uptick in the enforcement of these regulations. So whether it's OSHA, FCPA, SEC, I mean, more regulatory enforcement actions means higher compliance costs, more fear, among small and mid-sized business owners around whether they're going to get the next knock on the door from the IRS, from the SEC, from Department of Justice, from Department of Labor. I mean, it's one thing when a regulation is written and then it sits on the books and nobody enforces it. It's another thing when 3 and 4 times the number of regulatory enforcement actions are brought. That's when small business owners really feel like they're under siege, they're under attack. Right.
Well, and not only that, again, I think they're very fearful of what's in the pipeline right now when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to the Department of Labor, et cetera. But, with respect to President Obama, he did do a review of regulations at the White House. And through that review, they said they saved the business community $2 billion in regulatory costs by modernizing, streamlining, et cetera, out of $1.75 trillion. I know, and that's the response from the small business.
It's like a thank you, but that's saving you a penny on something that costs you $1.
That is the response of the small business community, and you do have to give President Obama credit in terms of what they did in upending, 1930 era style regulations when it comes to the SEC and crowdfunding. I think that was a good model for approaching the different agencies and maybe finding rules, across agencies that may be similar to that and coming up with proactive solutions. And in fact, the White House has been soliciting more ideas, but there's nothing in the Obama plan for the next 4 years that really tackles, I think, the root cause of this and looks at what we need to do to reform the regulatory system. But on the other hand, you do have Governor Romney, the Romney-Ryan, who do have more aggressive type of reforms. For example, they want to do an entire regulatory review, not only of existing regulations, but also the new regulations that President Obama has put on the book. They do want to require what is called congressional review authority, which would make Congress vote up or down, yay or nay, on any final rule that costs the economy $100 million or more. I think that is very significant. I mean, Congress can just say, oh, here's this law, and throw it back to the regulators. Then they complain about what the regulators have done. Well, why not make them vote on the final rule that the regulations put into place?
That's also the way that the legislation, I mean, look at Sarbanes-Oxley. Sarbanes-Oxley was passed, ended up being very expensive for companies to comply, but it was passed very broadly, and then all the enabling regulations were turned over to the various agencies to write. And you're right, Congress can, at that point, just say, oh, it's on the agencies now.
So a couple more things.
More accountability.
I think a couple more things that are very important from the small business perspective is requiring agencies to do a cost-benefit analysis, and that is in the Romney plan. We think that's really important for small businesses. Basically, giving the agencies a regulatory budget, a zero-based budget. That is, if they have a new regulation that is put on the book and it costs X, that they have to take another one off the books or modernize or streamline it, to make sure that they're sort of evening out the ledger, if you will, in terms of how much these regulations are costing the economy. And so I think these are some really good ideas that get at, to give tools to Congress and to the regulatory agencies to make them more accountable. I mean, particularly to small businesses, and particularly because small businesses are really disproportionately impacted. $10,000 per worker now they pay for federal regulations alone, and it's getting out of control. So, there is a distinct difference between the two camps on this, and we've been calling for regulatory reform for some time now. Whoever gets elected or reelected, as the case may be, we think regulatory reform, serious reform, needs to happen.
And would it be okay to invite our viewers to share some of their stories on the impact of regulation? Maybe go to the SBE Council website and email you or email the site and getting more of those stories so that we learn how.
I was going to say better yet to email the White House because they're open on this. But
just CC us.
But copy us with your idea, and we'd be more than happy to to look at those and see what we in the White House and the Congress can do together.